What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, UFC 307 just wrapped. Alex Pereira defended his belt in what was a fantastic fight against Khalil Rountree Jr. Today, we're going to be breaking down that fight from a technical standpoint, as well as talking about what's next for Khalil and what's next for the champion. We're going to get into the co-main event a little bit. Juliana Peña edging out a decision over Raquel Pennington, and then seemingly ducking Kayla Harrison and calling out Amanda Nunes. We're going to talk about what's going to be next for her and if she is actually going to be able to successfully avoid Kayla or if the UFC is going to force their hand. We're going to talk a little Mario Bautista and how he performed against Jose Aldo. Did he win fans with that performance? Did he lose them? And where does Jose go from here? And then finally, we're going to talk about one of our favorite fighters, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who is now on the wrong side of 40 years old. Is it time for him to call it a day, or does the Wonderboy still have some gas in his tank? So without further ado, Nick, let's get started with the main event.
Let's do it.
Alex Pereira, Khalil Rountree. If you like striking, then you loved this fight. This fight had all the elements that you would hope to see. It was exactly what we thought it was going to be. In fact, it was exactly what you predicted it to be. You were almost, I think you got called a prophet on one of the comments on YouTube. You did say it was going to start a little bit slower for Pereira. He was going to get his reads. He was going to pick up the pace in the third round and finish the fight in the fourth round. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's the gist of your prediction, and that turned out to be, literally spot on. So kudos to you.
Thank you, sir.
What did you see from a technical standpoint that Alex did? Because that fight wasn't without adversity and controversy. Khalil was having a lot of success with the bursts. He was pushing Alex back a lot, which is not something we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing Alex always being the aggressor, and he can almost walk people down without even throwing a whole lot of volume just because he's so intimidating and his power is so respected. But Khalil was able to actually back Pereira up a little bit. He was able to knock him down at one point. So Alex did have to battle through a tough fight to get the win.
For sure.
What did you see well that Alex did, and then also Khalil?
Well, thanks for shining my wheels on the prediction. It's very hard to get them right in combat sports. I'd say MMA is the hardest sport to predict, and it's very difficult to bet money on. So if you parted ways and you went with me, congratulations. Don't do it every time, but when Chama's on there, fourth round KO, it seems to be a good
broken
one.
Clock is right twice a day.
Exactly, exactly. But the X's and O's, man, this fight lived up to the hype. We all were hoping this would be just a great striker versus striker match, high-level stuff, big consequences on the line when you're talking about the 205 division, and it lived up to that. Look, styles make matchups. Rankings don't make matchups. I don't care that Khalil was number 8. He did better against Alex Pereira than almost everybody at 205. I mean, Izzy has a win over him, and Jan Blachowicz didn't have a win over him, but went the full distance with him. So when you look at that, and then you look at how he's done against Yuri Prochazka, how he's done against the other top guys at 205.
Jamal Hill. I mean, he's just absolutely demolishing people at 205.
Exactly. And Khalil hung in there pretty good. I mean, he had his moments in every single round. And I know, in the fourth round, it really did start to pick up against him, and he had no answers. He started to become a wounded fighter, and Chama's very good at exploiting those weaknesses and finding where you're weak and finding his shots. And a couple of things stuck out to me. So Khalil, and I want to shine Khalil up a little bit before
he deserves it.
Yeah, before we move on. But you have to talk about what Alex did, and Alex did so much well. This fight's different than a lot of the other fights we've seen Alex in recently. Khalil is a very fast fighter. He's dynamic. He loves to use blitzing, and he had a speed advantage. And you could see that in the early parts of the fight. Another thing that made it different was he's a southpaw. And so one of Chama's best weapons is to attack with his lead leg, your lead leg. And he's pretty good at chopping inside leg kicks, chopping outside leg kicks, and not telegraphing them at all. And he was able to do it last night, but it wasn't without changing his game plan. When you're fighting in traditional stance or fighting against traditional stance, the kicks and the availability for strikes are totally different than the open stance, the southpaw versus orthodox.
Yeah.
And he was able to find some really good, significant strikes on the legs of Khalil, which I believe helped him slow down Khalil in what was Khalil's probably most successful aspect of his game plan, which was his blitzing. Khalil is a shorter fighter. He didn't have the range, and we understand now that Alex Pereira is very good at utilizing his long limbs and his range, and he usually has an advantage when he's out there with his opponent. So Khalil really did have to bite down on the mouthpiece, kind of not really exactly level change because he wasn't ever looking for takedowns, but throw strikes and bring your head down a little bit, maybe squat a little bit in some of those shots and step so you can cover a lot of ground when the taller, longer Alex Pereira is evading. And everybody knows that when you start to evade, everybody gets taller. You're never supposed to get tall in a fight, but when you're moving backwards, it just naturally happens, especially when somebody's blitzing at you. It's just a natural tendency we all have. Your chin gets a little high, your back gets a little more straight. And Khalil knew that, so rather than attacking the body on those blitzes, he was headhunting, and he was having some success in there. So I think that was a really good feather in the cap to be able to deal with that sort of pressure and speed for Alex Pereira, because that is a type of blitz that's very difficult to understand, and Khalil was doing it really well. You could tell he practiced that a lot. So I think, like I said, rankings don't make the matchups, styles do. I had a feeling this was going to be a great fight. I'm pretty sure they left with some bonus money, and they deserved every bit of it because the card was great. But these guys, in the biggest moment, the biggest fight on the entire card, the last two guys to walk out, really went out there and threw it all on the line. And the best man got his hand raised. But I would have to say Khalil Rountree's stock went up for me, and I would like to see a ranking on next to his name even higher than 8, because I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but because he just lost. But what he did against the champion is a lot better than what 1, 2, and 3 have done against that same champion. So I feel like maybe he should have his stock go up a little bit, and maybe his ranking even go up a little bit. And then, of course, you've got 308 coming up. We've got Ankalaev and Rakic. It seems to me that the winner is going to fight Chama for the belt.
I would say so.
Maybe the loser should fight Khalil Rountree, and we kind of figure out who's next in line for the following year. In 2025, we'll have some answers for us. But, yeah, I think that was awesome card and a lot to look forward to at 205.
Yeah, and one interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people are considering is, Jan Blachowicz was the one fighter that went to decision with Alex Pereira, although it was a loss for Blachowicz.
Yep.
This was a 5-round fight. Had that fight been a 3-round fight like the Blachowicz fight, just to compare apples to apples here, Khalil could have squeaked that out on judges' scorecards.
With the crazy judging,
there's
too.
Definitely, especially with some of the judging that happened last night, the rounds 1 and 2 could have gone to Khalil Rountree, which, if you look at it and compare it to the Blachowicz fight, he actually did better than Jan did, even though he got finished in the 4th round. We don't know where the fight would have gone had the Blachowicz fight continued. So I think that's worth noting. Right. Alex Pereira is known for his lethal hook. Everybody knows that left hook is one of the most powerful strikes in all of combat sports, and it is. But last night, the jab was a thing of beauty. The jab really got the job started and really got the party kicked off for Alex Pereira.
It did the damage on his eye.
It completely damaged Khalil's eye. I counted 3 different cuts that will probably need stitches.
For sure.
And the jab was the reason for a lot of that. He maintained range and distance beautifully with the jab. Now, when you have an orthodox versus southpaw striker, typically, as you said, you see some different shots. And some of the outside low calf kicks that Alex likes to throw that he's really good at, he wasn't able to. It took him a minute to kind of get the timing and the movement down to start to land that on Khalil Rountree. Right. Whereas when he's fighting another orthodox fighter, he just whips that kick almost at will, even if you know it's coming, it's so well disguised and not telegraphed that it's you almost just can't check it. Last night, I think it was a little bit more difficult for Alex to find that shot. He just made it look easy because he's such a good striker. But I'd believe if you were to ask Alex, was that outside leg kick harder to find against Khalil than it was against other fighters with the mirrored stance that you have, I think he would probably say yes to that. Yeah. So,
and it goes mostly because of the angle.
Exactly.
It's the outside foot battle. Whoever's leading foot on the lead foot is on the outside, usually has the control of the situation. But that's such a finicky game because everybody's taking a step, and all it takes is one little step of your foot, and now you're not in control of the dance. Right. So yeah, that does make for a difficult angle for the calf kick.
Yeah, and but it opens up a kick, and that's the body kick. Yeah. So when you have two people in opposite stances, the entire side of the opponent's body is open, and they actually traded some really good body kicks.
Yeah.
Khalil landed one, I think it was in the 2nd round, where Alex had a little bit of a weird reaction. He kind of backed up to the cage. I think Alex is so stoic that you never know what he's feeling, especially he's a little bit more fun outside of the cage, but inside of the cage, he's just a stone-faced, very stoic figure. figure.
That stare down.
I think that hurt him. Yeah, the stare down is something like we've never seen before in MMA. It's his walkout, the stare down, the intro. To me, is one of my favorite things in the sport right now. It's my favorite walkout that's going in the sport today. But he landed some good body kicks of his own that really seemed to hurt Khalil as well. Alex also used clinch well. He landed some really good, he would use his hands to get inside, and then he would wrap up, that Thai plum sort of position, and he fired off a few good knees. But that finishing sequence, to me, is what makes Alex Pereira the best striker in all of MMA right now.
The patience,
the shot selection, how he was almost waiting and buying his time to find the shots that he wanted. He wasn't, you see a lot of fighters get somebody hurt and they throw caution to the wind and they just unload with very untechnical strikes. And a lot of times it comes back to bite them in the ass because sometimes the opponent's able to cover up and survive, and then the fighter that just tried to get you out of there is now exhausted and the tides turn.
Right.
Or many times we've seen a fighter go haywire trying to get an opponent out of there, and then they get clipped and knocked out. And I think Alex almost learned from his own mistake, because in the second Israel Adesanya fight, he was doing that. He was kind of had Izzy up against the cage. He was starting to get a little bit overzealous, and that's when Izzy found that shot that put him away. So I think Alex Pereira, what we saw last night, is the best Alex Pereira we've seen in the cage so far.
I agree.
And I think he's learned from some of his own mistakes as well as the mistakes of others, and the patience in the finish was beautiful.
Yeah.
And the fact that when you have a fighter that bloodied up, that injured, that concussed, that you have the wherewithal and the intelligence to go to the body, just boom, boom. And I think he finished on the liver shot.
Yeah.
Khalil, if you notice, I went back and watched, he was starting to drop before the uppercut. I think it was the liver shot that was folding him. It was putting him down. The uppercut was just the icing on the cake. So, I mean, Alex Pereira, what more can you say about him? The guy is incredibly exciting to watch inside the cage. He's incredibly fun he's a fun character to have in the UFC. I love this experiment of Alex Pereira, and I can't wait to see where he goes next, which brings me to the next thing I want to discuss, which is what's next for Alex. He's talked about going down and fighting Dricus du Plessis, but he said in the post-fight interview last night that his buddy, Sean Strickland, and now his former foe, now friend and training partner, is going to get his rematch. I'd heard rumblings of that. I hadn't seen anything confirmed.
Maybe they broke the news last night.
Yeah, maybe Pereira broke the news for us. So that, to me, is the fight to make. And I don't think I need to see Alex at 185 ever again. Him at 205. I don't want to see a depleted version of Alex. I'd rather see Alex at his best. And he also said, look, at heavyweight, John Jones and Stipe have their business. Tom Aspinall's the rightful back. I mean, Tom Aspinall, let's be honest, Tom Aspinall should be in the fight.
He's our champion.
He's the champ. So the fact that, Alex could squeak in and be the backup, I just don't see that as being realistic.
No.
I think if they bring a backup in, it should be Tom Aspinall. That's the rightful person, which is why Alex said, look, I'm comfortable in this division. I feel good in this division. I feel strong. The weight cut I feel everything's dialed in. And the results speak for themselves.
Right.
The guy is on an absolute tear at 205. He's on a finishing streak at light heavyweight. He's finished every fight he's been in this year. He's had 3 title defenses in 2024. There's no, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's no reason for him to change divisions now. Let's see what happens with Rakic and Magomed Ankalaev and see where it goes from there. But I personally like Alex Pereira at 205, at least for the time being, until we see what happens with John, Stipe, and Tom Aspinall. And then maybe if, the winner of that fight retires, Tom Aspinall becomes undisputed, and you're looking for an opponent, you could always throw Alex Pereira in there for that. Everybody would want to watch that fight. Alex would probably be a decent underdog in that fight. But for now, I say just hang tight where you are.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'd love to see him defend his belt a couple more times at 205. And look, he's a very active champion. And I know that he's only one weight class away from the heavyweights. It's a very slow. I mean, they're moving at a snail's pace right now. So I think...
If moving at all. I mean, it feels like heavyweight is just flat out not moving.
Tom Aspinall's moving, but the top is not going anywhere. But, I think that Alex Pereira, his days at heavyweight will come. I think there's some mega fights for him there. But he's so active right now, by the time the dust settles at heavyweight, he could very well be in the same position at 205 205 that Izzy was a few years back at 185, where he's cleaned out the division.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. He's made quick work of 3 of the top staples in the division.
All he really needs to do is beat Magomed.
Right, Magomed or Rakic.
Yeah.
Either one of those guys. He gets his hand raised against one of them. Now you're kind of waiting for those guys to fight each other and knock each other down to see who gets their next shot or their second shot or whatever. So I think that sticking around 205 is the right move. I don't need to see him go to 85 either. I don't want to see him. Him and Drickus don't have anything. I think that would just be a little bit far-fetched. I think you focus on 205 right now and you set your future up for going to heavyweight, and that's the way you go about it. And look, stylistically, we can talk about where he's going next, but what we saw last night was the best form of Alex Pereira that we've ever seen. And one thing that's crazy to think about is he came into this sport, immediately was known as an elite level striker. Proved to us very quickly over a couple of fights, okay, he's legit. Proved to us after a couple more fights, he's improving. Not just in MMA, not just in grappling. He's improving in his striking. And after last night, I would say his striking is better than we've ever seen Alex Pereira striking. I mean, last night was not exactly the same style that he comes out and fights with. Usually he's slow-paced from start to finish and very patient, just like he was in the finishing sequence. Last night, he came out with a blitz. He came out very fast and brought the pressure and brought the speed and everything to Khalil Rountree, made Khalil, who, in my opinion, I'm not a sports psychiatrist, or I can't read human bodies all that well, but he looked pretty nervous to me. Yeah. And I think Chama realized that in the stare down, that he was shaking, visibly shaking in there, not bouncing around and feeling good and loosening up. He was shaking. And so Chama realized that and wanted to put the pressure on him early. I think that was a good idea because it had all of Khalil's senses very heightened. He was very much on edge in the early parts of the fight. Found his success early. Obviously, the storm of Alex Pereira became too much at one point. And what was really interesting to think about was the striking was pretty close as far as significant strikes landed for the majority of the fight, except for the kicks to the legs. Alex was doing way more work on the legs of Khalil Rountree than Khalil was to Alex. And so that was where the difference was. And the striking accuracy is also where the difference was, because Khalil has thrown more strikes, like 30 or 40 more strikes than Pereira, but he had about a 30% landing ratio. Alex Pereira had like a over 60, maybe a 62% landing ratio in the 4th round.
Which is insane.
And then when he got into the 4th round, of course, when the beginning of the end started for Khalil, it started to get worse. I'm sure his stats even went up even more. Yeah. And the patience, one more time, I just want to give it up for the patience, because his awareness of knowing how much time he had on the clock. He had a full 2.5 minutes once he hurt Khalil Rountree, and that's when he really started to put it on him. But he was so patient. He was tracking. He wasn't chasing. He was cornering Khalil when he needed to, letting off some great shots. And I love that you alluded to the body shot. The liver shot is really what put Khalil down. But I think all of that was set up with tons of headhunting for about a minute and a half leading up to that. Yeah. He was headhunting. Didn't look like he had any interest in kicking or attacking the body. And that's why Khalil's guard got so high and so tight, opened up the body perfectly. And, once you start mixing it up, head and body, top and bottom, the fighter will go down if they're as hurt and wounded as Khalil was. So yeah, it was masterful.
Yeah, and it's always a thing of beauty when a fighter trains a certain way and then they implement it in the octagon. And I watch a lot of Alex's pad work and stuff like that, and he stays really safe. He keeps himself out of real. I mean, you're always in danger when you're in the cage against a fighter like Khalil Rountree, but you can mitigate that. And Alex did a great job of that for the first 15 minutes of the fight. But in that 4th round, when he had him hurt and he also had his timing and rhythm down, if you watch Alex hit pads, he stays right in the pocket. He slips and returns, slips and returns, rolls and returns too, blocks and absorbs a shot, and then throws something. Yeah. Like it literally, some of that finishing little sequence there that lasted about, let's say, 60 to 90 seconds, looked very similar to what he trains on the pads with that big guy that's the pad man of his.
And in sparring. He does the same thing in sparring a lot.
Exactly. And he when you're in the fire, and you have your opponent read like Alex does, to me, there's no more beautiful thing that can happen in a striking exchange in mixed martial arts than watching that, because he's right there to be hit, but he's slipping and he's returning. And you see a lot of people evade shots, and it's like, oh, I'm really good at slipping. But they don't return anything. So it's like, okay, great, you slipped a shot, but what did you do? Alex is slip, make them pay. Slip, make them pay twice. Roll, clinch, boom, knee to the head. It's really something to behold.
And then he'll
watch that.
And then he'll do that slip and then faint and just stand there and do nothing, and they're waiting to see what's coming. And that's when he can find those moments for the clinch. He'll grab you. He's like, okay, they're kind of crouched down because they're expecting maybe something up the middle or something to the body. I'll just grab Ty Plum and start throwing some knees. He had some great success in the clinch.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, this was a Muay Thai fight. I mean, these were two strikers that didn't really look to go to the ground at all. They could have done whatever they wanted on the feet, and Pereira just he had the answers.
Yeah, and it was, even more so than a Muay Thai fight, a lot of boxing more than anything. Besides, obviously the low calf kick, you have to factor that in, but Khalil did a really good job of catching a couple of those high head kicks and then off balancing Pereira
and ducking under one, which was pretty nice.
Yeah, and he was landing a straight as soon as Pereira Khalil was timing that really well, actually. Pereira would throw the high kick and Khalil would make it miss, and then he would be right on him with a straight punch. And so Alex kind of realized, like, okay, that high kick might not be it tonight. It was it for Yuri, the switch kick at least, but. All in all, amazing job for Alex Pereira. I'd like to see Khalil fight the loser of Rakic versus Magomed Ankalaev.
Yeah.
He doesn't lose any stock in my mind.
And with a performance like that, I think he could do pretty well against either one of those guys.
No doubt. No, he could knock either one of them out for sure. But I want to move on now to the co-main event, which wasn't nearly as exciting as the main event. Very close decision. Raquel Pennington, Juliana Peña. If I'm being honest, the fight wasn't as high level as a lot of the fights that we saw when Amanda Nunes was competing in the division, as we saw even with Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso. Yeah. There's, to me, the level at women's 135 right now is just not great.
Right.
We saw Kayla Harrison. So we can touch on the X's and O's a little bit, but what I want to talk more on is the call out that happened after the fight. Juliana winning the belt back, in split decision fashion, and then calling out Amanda Nunes, who has been retired for some time now. She's got her family. She's moved on to the next chapter of her life. I personally don't think that Juliana is enticing enough to rope Amanda out of retirement, which makes the call out of Kayla look the call out of Amanda look kind of like a duck to Kayla. And you saw Kayla in the back, with the camera on her, basically saying, like, of course she's running, she's ducking. And it felt like that to me, if I'm being honest. I try to come on here and be as honest as I possibly can. Yeah. It felt to me like Juliana is certainly trying to duck Kayla Harrison, because I think she knows that in all likelihood that's probably a nightmare matchup for her.
Yeah, and this fight and that fight either didn't blow our hair back, it wouldn't blow our hair back. But, I don't know, and I'll play devil's advocate for Juliana right now. I don't know if she understood. Obviously, she knows who Kayla is. She knows that she was on the card. It makes sense to assume that whoever Kayla fought and beat,
number 2 versus number 3, right?
Right. It just, you're doing some math here. We're making the next title fight tonight a little bit earlier than you guys' fight, right? That was what was happening, or so we thought. But I don't think Juliana knew they were going to have a camera on Kayla in the back. I think Juliana, like a lot of people, think about every time a guy has called out Conor McGregor. It's been happening for a long time. Amanda Nunes is no Conor McGregor, but she's the closest thing the females have to a Conor McGregor. Yeah. She's the biggest name. She's the GOAT. She's the female,
the best female fighter of all time. Yeah.
Right. So I guess, and she's had a little bit of an itch to come back a little bit. I don't know how sincere that is, but people talk about Amanda Nunes returning, and it doesn't seem as far-fetched as, when somebody's like, oh, Royce Gracie might return.
Exactly.
There's a little
Brock
bit.
Lesnar's coming back.
Exactly. Yeah. They might tease that.
Stipe's coming back.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Brock and Stipe for 400. No. So I don't know if she did. So I'll play devil's advocate. I don't know if she knew that, but it did look like a miss. It did look like a ducking because the UFC had the camera on Kayla. And obviously Kayla's the next fight. Amanda's not going to jump in for the next title shot. I think Juliana, It's a tough fight for her to beat Kayla. Kayla's so big and so strong, but anything can happen. She was able to beat Amanda, and I certainly don't think that Kayla Harrison would beat Amanda. So crazy things happen. Again, we'll revert back to styles make matchups, and I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, Juliana, she does have that win over Amanda, but I look at that as a really careless and kind of totally out of character performance for Amanda. And
I know the game's not staged, but that felt like the most staged fight of all time.
Yeah. Amanda just abandoned all technique and just started slugging it. That was a weird off night for Amanda Nunes, and I'm comfortable calling it an off night because when you look at the body of work that Amanda's done, that was totally different from anything that we've ever seen out of her. And then she comes back and dominates. So, to me, what Juliana would need to beat Kayla is what Amanda possesses, which is real firepower in her hands, which she doesn't really have. You know what I mean? Like, she's got good jiu-jitsu, but Kayla is way bigger, way stronger, and probably a better overall grappler. She might not have the submission, acumen that Juliana has, but I certainly don't see Juliana submitting Kayla Harrison. So I see this fight taking place largely with Kayla in top position on the ground. Ground and pound. I see it probably being a decision and Kayla winning decisively. As you said, anything can happen, but when you have the kind of skill set that Juliana possesses, I feel pretty comfortable in saying that my money would be squarely on Kayla Harrison to get that job done.
Yeah, and statistically and historically, the females don't finish fights near as much, and the lighter weight classes in the men's don't finish fights near as much as the heavier. The women only go up to 135, so it's not possibly that big of humans. And yeah, I just think that Kayla Harrison has a style that can beat Juliana for sure. She can go out there and outgrind her. I think that her striking is good enough to keep herself safe. I don't think there's a whole lot of danger when you're striking with Juliana. I mean, not to pick on her. She's the world champ. She just won her belt, so who am I? But fundamentally, everything that she was doing on the feet was just out of whack. It was just wrong. Like, I mean, the balance, it looked like she was completely unbalanced. It looks like her legs were not in the right position. Her footwork was really wonky, but she got her hand raised. She was able to win the fight. So I guess it worked for her. But yeah, I mean, what I see when I see Juliana the champion, I see Kayla Harrison, who looked good, but she had a full fight with a relatively decent opponent. I would be licking my chops if I was Valentina Shevchenko, because Valentina could become champ. After what we saw a couple weeks ago at the Sphere, I believe if she brought that skill set up to 135 and fought either of those two ladies last night, she would have become the champion. And I also think that if she were to go out there and fight Kayla Harrison, that it would be really competitive, and I would probably put my money on Valentina to win.
Skill-wise, she's way better, but size on the feet at least.
And remember, Amanda was the size was the only reason she beat Valentina. I don't think she had the skill advantage.
Yeah, and that's where Kayla would have that. She would have a massive size and strength advantage. But I think take Pennington out, insert Val, take Peña out, insert Val. Either way, she would have won that fight last night. The champion at 125 for the women is far superior than the top of the heap at 135.
But what about what happened at 135 for the men?
Yeah, well, I mean, so Jose Aldo, legend, one of my favorite fighters of all time.
So fun.
Mario Bautista, listen, like the guy got his hand raised. Like, he did what he had to do to beat a legend in the sport.
Yeah.
However, when you are an up-and-coming fighter trying to break into the top 5 of one of the most difficult divisions that the sport's seen over the last 3 years, and you get signed up, I mean, you say it on this podcast all the time, former champions are like such a rare thing to find.
Right.
Because most of the time when somebody loses the belt, they're around for a few more fights. And if they're truly on the decline, they don't go the way of BJ Penn and just hang out until they wear out their welcome.
Right.
They're like, I'm not going to sit here and just let young people put my name on their resume, and so they leave.
Right.
So they're hard to it's very hard to get squared up with a guy who was a champion at one point in time. That's what Mario Bautista had last night. And he didn't just have it against any former champion. He had it against one of the greatest and most revered champions in the history of Brazilian mixed martial arts.
Right.
So I think that it was kind of a miss the way he fought Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
Look at Kevin Holland, who fought just a fight or two before. That is a fighter who the fans get behind. Yeah. Kevin doesn't win all of his fights. Kevin probably won't become a champion. You know, maybe crazy things happen. You know, we'll see where his career takes him. But
he'd have to change some things to become champion.
Exactly. It's very difficult for him to become a champ at 170 or 185, given the layout as it stands today. But that is not going to stop Kevin from making millions and millions of dollars throughout the course of his career.
And gaining tons of fans.
And I'm not saying that it's all about money, because it's not. But at the end of the day, some of it's at least about money.
Right.
And Mario Bautista had an opportunity last night to go out there and give the fans, because Mario Bautista at the end of the day is a great striker.
Great.
And Jose Aldo, we know, is one of the best strikers, you know, in the lighter weight classes in the history of the sport. Go out there and put on a show with Jose Aldo.
Right.
You know, you're the feature bout. You're the one fight right before 2 title fights. This is a pay-per-view. Give the fans what they came to see.
Right.
Don't hold Jose Aldo against the cage and stomp on his feet and try to grind out a decision.
Yeah.
To me, it was a bit of a miss. He'll probably move up a spot or 2 in the rankings, but I don't think he won any favors with the UFC matchmakers, certainly not Dana White. I know Dana was, you know, vocally unhappy about that fight when in the post-fight press conference when it was over. So to me, split decision. Could have gone. Was it split decision or was it unanimous? I can't remember. There was so many split decisions last night.
Yeah.
Last night was the night of the split decision.
And awful reffing and awful judging.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think that Mario could have done a little more to make the fight exciting. He should have been looking for the finish. When Jose had space, I think he was winning a lot of those exchanges. Yeah. And, you know, I was hoping, and I may sound a little bit like I got sour grapes. I don't really, and I don't have anything against Batista, but you know, when Jose Aldo's on the card, you have a certain expectation for what that fight's going to look like. And if it doesn't look that way, it's never because Jose didn't show up.
Right.
It's because the opponent fought in a way that wasn't conducive to the fight being exciting. So credit to Batista, but I would have loved to see him do a little bit more to try to make the fight more exciting and go for that finish.
Yeah, and the Utah crowd wasn't having any of it. The fight that happened, moments before that in the last prelim, every time Joaquin Buckley went in to shoot for a takedown, he got booed immediately. Yeah. And the crowd was letting the fighters hear it. So when I heard Batista on the microphone afterwards, and he was like, yeah, that was the game plan. If he can't get off the wall, that's his problem, not mine. He's fully aware of that. He can hear in the auditorium or in the arena the fans booing. I mean, literally, he got broken up by the ref and immediately shot in again and just got roaring boos from across the crowd. And in my opinion, look, there's 2 ways you can look at this sport. It is prize fighting, but, you know, these people are competitors at the highest level. So Batista just wants to get his hand raised. I get that. If he's not a showman, if he's not a worker, if he's not an entertainer, then that's so be it. You're never going to make a lot of money. You're probably never going to get a title shot, because more than your record, you have to be a guy that can do it all for the UFC. You have to be able to sell tickets. You have to be able to entice people into watching your fights. Your fighting style needs to be entertaining. And when they give you something like a former champion, and not just any former champion, we're talking about a guy who is in everybody's list of top 5 favorite fighters, you know, top 10 favorite fighters.
If you've been watching long enough, Jose Aldo's in your top 10 of all time. No question.
100%. He's so fun to watch. You're right. It's like Alex Pereira. It's like Max Holloway. These are the guys everybody loves them, whether you've been watching for 20 years or you've been watching for 20 months. Right. So, yeah, I think that Batista came out and he played the bad guy. I think he lost a lot of fans. Whatever people did know about him, which probably wasn't that much, isn't going to translate well. I think the UFC sees that. They don't love that. And when you're looking out for your career, yes, winning is important, but winning isn't everything in the UFC. You have to be the type of fighter that they want to have on their roster. And when you've got a guy like Jose Aldo who's selling tickets, who's really bringing a lot of energy to a card, you got to give the people what they came to see, which was an entertaining fight. I don't think Batista is lacking in skills to give the people an entertaining fight. I think that he looked for an easier way out. He's very good at keeping somebody against the cage. I mean, but he had 0 success with the takedowns. I mean, literally 0. I think at the end of the fight, it was 11 takedowns defended for Jose Aldo. So, I mean, he was never in any danger, and some of those shots were pretty good. So, speaks to the level that Jose is still operating at offensively and defensively. He was looking to fight all the way to the end. I had Jose Aldo winning the fight because I don't think position should go over control of the fight.
Well, damage is first and foremost.
Yeah,
he landed the better shots, no question.
Clearly the better shots. And so it sucks to see Jose go back down, and of course we're going to see what happens from here for him. But Batista definitely didn't gain any fans. I don't think he's going to go help himself out in his UFC career with a win like that, and I hope he learns from that, from the interview, from the fighting style, from everything. Look, it might not be your night. You might have to entertain a little bit more than go out there and be boring. But if you do that kind of stuff, you'll get more former champions. You'll get better placement on the cards. You'll get better opportunities. Look at Sugar Sean.
You'll get somebody like you go out there and you put Jose away, or you make it a really fun fight. You'll get somebody like Sean.
Exactly.
Because Sean needs to win another fight, because it seems like Umar and Merab are going to handle their business, and then Sean will probably have to win one more, and so
a crazy performance out of Batista could have wound him up in a shot with Sugar Sean or somebody similar.
Right, exactly. And 135 is just simply too stacked to have a performance like that and think you're going to move the needle.
Totally agree.
So I want to wrap on Wonderboy Thompson.
Oh, let's do it.
You know, somebody who never lets the fans down. You know, the nicest guy in the UFC. One of the slickest dressed fighters. You know, I mean, you can't say enough good things about Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
The gray hair, man.
How about the gray? I mean, the silver fox.
Embracing the gray.
I know I am. So it's good to see somebody else.
Begrudgingly, I am too.
But, you know, Wonderboy, 41 years old.
Yeah.
His dad came out and said he's going to fight until he's 45.
Uh-oh.
Is that a good idea? I love Wonderboy Thompson. He's been one of my favorite fighters to watch for the last decade. I don't know that I need to see a whole lot more out of him. And it's not because he didn't look good.
No, he looked great.
Did. I mean, he actually looked pretty good against Shavkat Rakhmonov not that long ago. He beat Kevin not that long ago. And he was looking good against Joaquin Buckley. But the reality of the matter is, from that finish last night, we kind of saw that the chin's not really there anymore. Stephen Thompson,
and it used to be.
He used to be his game. Don't let the karate stance and style fool you. That guy's a banger. He could go out there and he could eat a shot and give you one or two right back. But you know, after 40 years old, we just simply can't take a punch like we could at 32 or 27. It's just the human body's not set up that way.
Father time.
Exactly. And so if we're talking 4 more years, I just mentioned BJ Penn a few minutes ago. I don't want to see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson become the next BJ Penn.
Right.
Now, he's not slowing down to the level that BJ was. He still looks good, but the question is, can he take the damage? Because you could piece your opponent up all the fight long and then get a shot landed on you and it's curtains.
Right.
So, you know, I would like to see Wonderboy finish out 2025. I'd like to hear him come out and say, look, guys, 2025 is it for me.
3 fights.
I'm going to fight 3 fights this year. You guys tell me who you want to see me fight. Let the UFC make some fun matchups for the Wonderboy.
No wrestlers.
I've said this before, and it doesn't make sense because of the rankings or anything like that. Israel Adesanya versus Wonderboy Thompson. You know, if Wonderboy could fight at 185, I mean, Izzy would be so massively favored. And he would probably finish Wonderboy, but I feel like Izzy's looking for something to do. He's looking for something fun. He's not necessarily on the immediate title rise type of trajectory right now. So Michael Venom Page.
I was going to say, I love your Izzy call out. That's never going to happen. Michael Venom Page is the fight to make.
I mean, let's see 2 or 3 more out of Wonderboy. Let's put a bow on it and say, you know what, 2025 is going to be it. I'm going to fight 2 or 3 times. I'm going to make it fun fights. Let the matchmakers have some fun with the Wonderboy and then call it a day. Him fight until 45. And the other thing about Steven is that he is so talented in other areas. He's got a great podcast.
Put him on the desk.
Put him on the desk. Put him on the mic. Let him interview the fighters. I mean, there's a lot of guys where it's like, man, you better make a lot of money right now because you literally can't do anything other than fight in the UFC.
You got a face for radio and not a mouth for it.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. But Stephen Wonderboy has the face for TV and the mouth for it.
That's
so
right.
I'd like to see him call it a career in the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. I don't think there's any reason for him to fight till he's 45 years old.
Well, I agree in some ways, but what we saw out of him last night, he still had his pep in his step. He still looked good. We've seen him in the last 3 fights fighting very competitively, winning some of those fights, and it's all against really high level guys. Stylistically or body type wise, usually a nightmare for him, but he seems to do pretty good. And even in fights where he's not winning, he has his moments and still looks good. So 45 might be a little bit of a stretch, and I don't know if he wants to try to do that, elongate his career that much longer. But I think that Wonderboy is definitely still good for at least 3 more fun fights. And don't get many wrestlers. Let's get some strikers in there. 3-round fights. He's perfect for that same slot he was just on, that last fight on the prelims of a major card. Or, if you have to, I guess he doesn't even need to worry about title contention. So we don't need main events on fight nights. Just keep him on the pay-per-views. People love him. I think he's got some good rub when he goes to a city and they get to experience the Wonderboy Thompson fight week. I think there's a lot to Wonderboy. And then, of course, when he's ready to exit, put him on the desk, put him in a suit. I'm sure he's going to look like $1 million. He's probably, in a few years' time, would be sounding like John Anik, just clean on it and shining up everybody. I bet he'd be great interviewing fighters after the fights, and even Karate Combat. Heck, Karate Combat's making some waves. That's what he started with. He's been doing karate since before MMA was like a sport, or maybe I'm off by a couple of years, but
probably
close.
Not much given his age.
Right. It started in 93. It didn't really start until 2001, and he's not that old. He's still just about 40. But I think maybe a Karate Combat fight or two. You get him with some of these other high level Lyoto Machida, a Showtime Pettis, somebody like that, a random person in Karate Combat that could mix it up with him. I think Raymond Daniels, that'd be a lot of fun. You give him something like that. Just let him compete. I think he's a lifelong competitor. I think he keeps his body and his mind in good enough shape to continue competing. Maybe not at the top 5 level of the UFC anymore now that he's over 40 years old, but he still belongs in that top 15 ranking for a couple more years, couple more fights, 5 more fights, and then I think he should move into something a little bit more extracurricular, a little bit more fun, and something that he doesn't have to worry about grappling with. He can go out there and show us his original roots of where he became a martial artist, and I think his dad would probably love to see that. I'd love to see it. I know Karate Combat would probably back the Brinks truck up for him, so yeah.
Yes,
a lot of good stuff for Wonderboy.
Absolutely. Guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. We hope that you enjoyed UFC 307 as much as we did. Stay tuned. We drop videos every Monday, and we are going to get cracking on some predictions and some thoughts on UFC 308 coming up here in a couple of weeks. Until next Monday, have a wonderful day.
Come hang out in the Discord. Peace.
Yes.